The New York Giants 2025 draft class is loaded with promise and excitement, but can these young stars become the foundation of a team in repair? We take a look at that and more coming your way next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all my written work. And as always, we welcome on in our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. And thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. All right, Giant fans, on today's show, I thought we'd take a really in-depth look at the New York Giants class of 2025, their draft class. There's a lot of young talent, a lot of promise there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at some questions that the various members can answer. Then we're going to take a look at some different stats that were maybe missing from the Giants last year or in years past, and how, hopefully if those young bucks can bring some of that production over to this level, maybe we'll replenish some of what's been missing for the Giants. And then last but not least, we'll take a bigger picture look at the impact this class has on the future. So that's our schedule of topics for today. Again, welcome on in to everyone. All right, folks, let's kick things off now. These are questions, generic questions that this draft class can answer. And I've kind of broken it down according to player. So, for example, Abdul Carter, first round pick, Darius Alexander, third round pick. Their versatility and pass rushing ability is going to open all kinds of new avenues for defensive coordinator Shane Bowen that he didn't necessarily have last year. All right. So whenever you have players who are versatile and who are good at an area that maybe you were not as good in years past, that can open up a lot of possibilities. So I'm curious to see how Bowen deploys them. Where's Carter going to line up, for example? Is he going to be mostly on the outside? Is he going to be on the weak side? Is he going to be an inside linebacker? Where are they going to have them operating, and what are they going to have them do? Is he going to be a spy? Is he going to hunt? Is he going to drop into coverage? So these are some questions I want to see answered with Carter. Now, with Alexander, he's part of that front seven. He's going to be a part of that front seven, I should say. All right. This is a kid who can play some nose tackle if you need him to, which, if Dexter Lawrence isn't in there, maybe they plug him in there to fill the gap a little bit while Dexter takes a breather. But Alexander is primarily a B-gap / over the tackle type guy. Sometimes you see him rush from the outside. This kid's going to be a lot to handle. You've heard me say on this program that Dexter Lawrence can't do it all by himself. He doesn't have to now anymore, I don't think. So I'm excited to see what Darius Alexander, how he's deployed by the coaching staff. Okay, Cam Scatterbo. The Giants have been missing a huge running back, a power running back, for quite some time now. Their running game has primarily been all about the finesse type, the quickness and everything like that. Scatterbo gives them a big power back. Now, they had that with Saquon Barkley somewhat, but when I think of Scatterbo, I think of a smaller Brandon Jacobs, that kind of a power back. So that is something the Giants have not had in quite some time, and it's going to be something that I think is going to give the rushing offense another dimension. Because, look, if you think back to the days of Brandon Jacobs and Ahmad Bradshaw, the two of them used to double team defenses. So Bradshaw would be the quick guy who would tire. Actually, let me back up. Brandon Jacobs would be the big bowling ball, if you will, the human bowling ball that would wear down defenses. And they'd be, so tired that when Bradshaw got to the field and was often running. His quickness absolutely finished defenses off. So Scatterboo's going to, I think, bring that to the Giants' rushing offense. All right, Jackson Dart, he's probably not someone we're going to see this year. But as we all know, he's projected to be the future quarterback. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what he brings actually in the next segment. So I'm just going to mention him because he is a first round pick. He's part of that class. But Jackson Dart is the future quarterback. And I'm going to tell you why a little later on, why I think that he's going to make it here in New York. Marcus Bowe, I've been referring to him as the next David Deal. Now, for those of you who don't remember David Deal was versatile. He could play anywhere on the offensive line except for center. When you have a guy who could play multiple positions on a critical spot like the offensive line, that is such a plus. Now, the question obviously becomes, can Marcus Bowe play those positions at a high level? I think he can. Is he going to get a lot of snaps this year? I don't think he will. He's still a rookie. He still has some technique issues that have to be smoothed out. But I would not be surprised if you see Marcus Bowe as maybe a jumbo tight end in short yardage and goal line situations. So Marcus Bowe, definitely excited about his future. And then I want to talk about Corey Black and Thomas Fidone II, because the 2 7th-round draft picks. Those are guys I think are more for the future, kind of like Dart, but not quite like Dart's going to be like a prominent part of the offense. But when I think of Corey Black and Thomas Fidone II, I think of special teams depth, and I just think of overall depth. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about them coming up in upcoming segments. But this class, these members, really, on paper at any rate, looks like another solid class for general manager Joe Schoen. So there's a lot to like, but wait till I get to the next segment because I'm going to tell you exactly what there is to like about this class. And trust me, there is a lot. We're going to take a look at stats that these guys accomplished in college that maybe, if they could transfer that over to the NFL level. This is stuff that has been missing from the Giants. So we'll talk about that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. New to FanDuel? Hey, perfect timing. New customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if their first bet wins. So go on, open that FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Coming up this week on Locked On Giants, I'm going to have, it looks like, a guest. Now, this is somebody I have never had on the show before. I think a lot of Giants fans will recognize this person. Hopefully I'll have him on for Wednesday's show. If not by Wednesday, I would think maybe by Thursday. But I'm really excited to have this guy come on the program. Like I said, he's never been on the program before, but it's just something a little different that I'm going to be doing here on the Locked On Giants podcast as we get through the summer and work our way towards training camp. So hope you will tune into that as well as the other shows we have planned for you here on Locked On Giants. All right, in this segment, let's take a look at some stats, key stats from the Giants class of 2025. Stats that if they could bring those over to the offense or the defense, depending on where they play, these are stats that maybe the Giants have been missing, production that they have been missing. All right, so I'm going to start off, obviously, with Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter, as I mentioned, this guy, if you've been listening to my shows, reading me over on New York Giants on SI, I can't say enough good things about Abdul Carter and what we saw of him in the spring. And I know some of you are probably like, well, it was shorts and shells. It wasn't really, contact practices. So how about we pump the brakes? But the speed of this young man off the snap and his ability to fight his way into the backfield. Giant fans, you're going to be excited by what you see from him. I guarantee you. All right. So that being said, the versatility of Abdul Carter is certainly something to be excited about. But what was also something to be excited about, that if he could bring that over to the Giants defense, is the pass rush ability. All right. Now, at college, in his final year at Penn State, he led all draft eligible edge rushers with 66 quarterback pressures. That's a lot. All right. And he also, against the run, had 43 stops, which is not too bad either. Normally, when you get a young edge rusher or edge player come into the NFL, he's either good at one thing or the other. It's very rare that he's good at two things: running, stopping the run, and pass rushing. Carter is good at both, folks. And you throw coverage in there, which is the third element, right? In coverage, Abdul Carter, and this is all, by the way, per Pro Football Focus, he was second in pass breakups last year amongst draft eligible outside linebackers. So Carter, last year amongst draft eligible linebackers, led all of his peers. He had 2 pass breakups in coverage. So the Giants are getting themselves a complete player in Abdul Carter, a guy who could drop in the coverage, a guy who can rush the passer, who can, play the run. He could do it all. So Giant fans, you're going to be excited by him. Wait till the pads go on. Obviously, we'll see more. But that quick first step, it reminds me a lot of O.C. Umenyiора's first quick step off the snap, how O.C. used to time the snap to perfection. And before the offensive lineman had a chance to even react, O.C. was by them and in the backfield disrupting things. That's Abdul Carter for you. All right. Now, let's take a look at Jackson Dart. All right. The other first round pick. Again, we probably won't see Dart this year. And if we do, it won't be till later in the year. But one thing that stands out about Jackson Dart is his accuracy rate in intermediate and deep balls, particularly the deep pass. So last year with Ole Miss, he had a 70.8% completion rate in intermediate passes of 10 and 19 yards, 42% on deep balls of 20 plus yards for a 109.8 passer rating. Folks, that number alone, that statistic alone, better than anything the Giants had from their quarterbacks last year. So that right there should make for a better passing game. When you consider that the Giants have speed at receiver, they've got guys that are capable of slicing the top off the defense. Jackson Dart, if all things can go the way they expect it to, he's going to be probably the most exciting quarterback this team has had since Eli Manning. So a lot of optimism about Jackson Dart in the organization. Darius Alexander, I mentioned his versatility in the last segment, but we talk about versatility. Darius Alexander brings something that I don't think the Giants have on their defensive line except for Dexter Lawrence. What is that? He can rush the passer and play the run. Now, considering that Darius Alexander came from a smaller school program at Toledo, he had 83 stops against the run, which not too bad. All right. Pass rush, he generated 101 pressures over the course of his career at Toledo. Again, when was the last time, other than Dexter Lawrence, the Giants had a guy playing on the defensive line that could rush the passer and stop the run, be an every down player? Darius Alexander can be that guy. Now, I don't know what his injury was that kept him out of the spring. Hopefully he's okay, and he's able to catch up with what he has missed. That's always a little bit of a concern. But once he's good to go, I think they finally have found the right partner for Dexter Lawrence, replacing what they lost a few years ago when they traded away Leonard Williams. All right, continuing onward, let's talk about Cam Skattebo. Cam Skattebo, as I mentioned, a big bowling ball type of player. He's going to knock people down. He's a tough runner, a power runner. And something that he hopefully will bring to the Giants, particularly the rushing game, yards after contact. All right. So in his career, Cam Scatterboo averaged 3.95 yards after contact per attempt. Not since Saquon Barkley was here. Saquon averaged 3.07 yards after contact per rushing attempt. All right. So that gives you an idea of what the Giants have kind of been missing last year in the rushing game, is that guy who can shake off defenders who are trying to bring him down. And to that point, Cam Scatterboo forced 262 missed tackles in his college career. You compare that to Saquon, 260. Giants have been missing that. You don't want to see guys being tackled by the ankle or being brought down easily. Cam Scatterboo is going to be like a little mini human plow pushing through the second level, that first level, the second level, maybe even to the third level. So that has definitely been missing from the Giants offense. All right, let's talk about Marcus Bowe. Marcus Bowe, as I mentioned, could be the next David Deal, a guy who could play anywhere on the offensive line except center. And who knows, they might even try him at center. Who knows? Right now, I think the plan, though, is for him to play at tackle. Marcus Bowe, as a pass blocker, he played in 1,092 pass blocking snaps in college. He only gave up 51 quarterback pressures for a 97.3 pass blocking rate. That's not too bad. So, with Marcus Bowe, this is early. This is just a prediction, but should the Giants want to move on from Jermaine Illuminor after this year, Jermaine Illuminor, his contract up after this year, perhaps Marcus Bowe becomes the heir apparent at right tackle. So something to keep an eye on. But of course, Marcus Bowe can also play inside at guard if you need him to. So he's kind of like, if you think about it, he's kind of like a Jermaine Illuminor type. If you want to compare with a current Giant, a guy who could play on the outside, but if you need him to move inside, he could do that as well. Now, Fidone, let's talk about him, the tight end. Fidone, not really used a whole lot in the passing game, but in pass blocking, 79 pass blocking snaps in his career, he didn't allow a single quarterback pressure. Pretty good. Fidone, I think, needs to get maybe a little bit bigger up top, add a little bit more strength. That's why I have him kind of projected as a possible practice squatter. But the talent's there, the promise is there. The guy was chosen for, amongst other reasons, because he can pass block. All right, just needs to build it up so he can handle it at this level. And then finally, Corey Black, the cornerback, also one of the 7th round picks. Corey Black can give you special team snaps, and he can get his hands on the ball if you put him on defense. He had 19 career pass breakups in 1,294 coverage snaps. All right, so right now, I don't know that Corey Black necessarily makes the 53-man roster. I think special teams is going to be the deciding factor with him. But certainly you look at the production he had on defense during his college years, and there's stuff there to like. There's definitely stuff there to like, and production that the Giants could certainly use down the line. All right, Giant fans, coming up next, we're going to have some final thoughts on the impact, the future impact that this 2025 New York Giants draft class can make. So don't go anywhere. We'll have that for you right after this. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we're talking about the rookies. Always excited to see the rookies, They look so good in rookie minicamp, and then they get to the OTAs and the mandatory minicamp, and you start to see maybe a little bit of a drop-off because now they're mixing in with the veterans. Didn't really see that much of a drop-off with the rookies that were able to participate in the spring with the veterans, which was an encouraging sign. But of course, we have to temper our enthusiasm here because they weren't in pads. there was no contact. So you got to kind of scale that back a little bit. All right. So that being said, let's talk in general terms about the impact, the future impact that this rookie class could potentially have on the Giants. They finally have some solid depth at positions where they did not have depth before. All right. Offensive line, defensive line, outside linebacker, cornerback, tight end. They've got young talent in the cupboard that is going to be developed. This is something that the Giants have done a bad job of in recent years. They haven't gotten quality young talent that they have been able to develop to eventually take over for when the guys in front of them move on. So what happens? The Giants now have to go to free agency. They have to spend money that otherwise might have been used for, oh, I don't know, re-signing guys that maybe they wanted to keep but weren't able to. They also end up spending in free agency to fill holes that develop at a rapid pace. And oh, by the way, it turns out that by the end of free agency, by the end of the eligibility period, they're not getting any comp picks for the following year because they had to spend more than they did lose more. So finally having young talent in the cupboard is a big thing. And it's, every year a team's going to have draft picks, but to have quality draft picks that you feel good about, that you can develop into something special down the line, that's a plus. All right. So that is a huge, huge impact that I could see this class making right off the bat. Okay. Continuity is another one. How many times do we watch this Giants team go through a season and then there seems to be significant turnover in the roster? Continuity is a good thing because it's the only way you're going to build up chemistry and, start to really play and fly around out there. Now, according to Over the Cap, the Giants have a 76.8% roster turnover from last year, which is ninth in the NFL. Ultimately, you want to have a lower turnover rate. You want continuity. Now, if you remember what General Manager Joe Schoen said when he was first hired, his goal in building up the roster, draft, develop, and retain. Well, they've been drafting every year. Developing, hit and miss. Last couple of years, it's gotten better. Retaining, that hasn't been as good. That needs to get better. And I think, if these young bucks, and I'm including last year's draft class, the class of 2024, which was a solid class, they continue to develop and establish themselves as cornerstones of this franchise, of this roster, the Giants are going to have something there. And that's going to have a positive effect. It's going to stop a vicious cycle that this team has had for pretty much over a decade. And that cycle is poor drafting, guys that just haven't developed for whatever the reason, guys that walk out the door or who are traded away, and just not enough assets to replenish some of these guys. When you have to keep spending money in free agency, you're going to lose out on opportunities to have comp picks. And if you're projecting each year's draft class to say, okay, this class is going to be strong in this area. And oh, by the way, that area is going to coincide with a need that we're going to have. Well, the Giants haven't been able to do that, which is why sometimes, especially early on in the Joe Schoen regime, it seems like the Giants have kind of been plugging holes and just kind of hoping for the best and not getting the best. So I'm not going to sit here, though, and say that the Giants are shaping up to be a Super Bowl team. I think that's a little too premature to say. I think what we all want to hope for at this stage and what the Giants should aim for is a more competitive team, particularly in the division. Had they closed the gap with Washington? I think so. Have they closed the gap with Dallas? I think you can make a case. Have they closed the talent gap with the Eagles? I won't go there. I don't think they have. They're getting there, but the Eagles are just so far ahead of the Giants right now and where they are roster-wise that I don't think you could say that the talent gap has been closed. But the Giants have given themselves more talent to be more competitive against some of these tough opponents that they're going to face in 2025. Now, what happens from here? Well, we have to wait till they get on the field, but on paper, and I get it, nobody ever won an offseason award for best roster makeover on paper. But on paper, there's a lot to like about this draft class and how they're fitting into the overall roster. They just need a little bit of luck in terms of staying healthy, which has been a problem, in terms of just developing. And the Giants, they've made some tweaks to the coaching staff in the offseason. So we'll see how some of these guys develop. We'll see how they fit in. We'll see how the offense and the defense progress from last year. I think this year you're going to see the Giants able to do a lot more of what they wanted to do versus what they couldn't do because they didn't have the talent or the right fits, I should say. So overall, I remain optimistic about this Giants team, having seen them in the offseason, knowing what I know about the stats and the research and the film work and all the stuff that we've done. I think this year is going to be a better year for the Giants. And I think, we're all going to be relatively pleased by the end of the 2025 season. All right, Giant fans, that is going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. As always, thank you for tuning in and spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. We hope to see you again tomorrow.